Welcome everybody to our special workshop, Friday, June 6, 2025, 12:30. Call to order, declaration of quorum, 7 members present. Welcome everybody. Thank y'all for being here. This is the calendar. This is the only day in June that we would all be here in June on the same day. So I appreciate it. And to y'all that have to work on Friday, I know it's the first Friday off, so I apologize, but thank y'all for being here. Brings to item C, hearing of citizens. We don't have any on the docket for today. And then D, workshop session, discussion of the 25-26 budget. Ms. Wilson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hort, Dr. Harkrider, and Board of Trustees. Thank you for coming here on Friday as well. There are a lot of slides in here, but guess what? This will be the last time I'll talk about the legislative session, well, in this much detail. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to cover a legislative update. We're going to talk about the 25-26 budget. We're going to look at some compensation, and then we're going to talk about next steps. I've got a lot of detail in here, but if you have any questions, just let me know. So starting with the legislative session. So as you know, CSISD was June 2nd, and then the governor has to sign all bills in by the 22nd. The one that we were really kind of wanting to, okay, sorry. The one that we were really watching for is if he would sign House Bill 2. And so if you can kind of see, he did that on Wednesday of last week. So it's ready to go. So the basic allotment provides $55 increase to our total funding mechanism. So that brings the basic allotment to $6,215. We were excited about that. They repealed the 30% compensation increase. So if you remember, anytime they increased the basic allotment before, a percentage of those funds had to be sent on salaries. So they repealed that. That's no longer in the language. They also kind of worked a few things, and you're going to see that through the allotments that we receive and some other things where they're really taking a shift and taking things out of WADA. And so where we use the WADA is when we figure our tier 2 funding, and they're kind of removing some of that mechanism so our WADA will kind of gradually go down, which is how they're funding some of the things that are going in tier 1. Okay, so this is another example. So what they did is our guaranteed yield used to go up with property values, and so it would go up a little every year. So they took that out, they froze it, and then they moved this $55 per basic allotment over to the basic allotment funding. So they're kind of working things so that they're funding within the formula on some of those things, if that makes sense. We have another allotment. This is the ABC allotment. You're probably going to see it listed as that. The positive is this is based on enrollment. So what they've done here is given us $106 per enrolled student that we're going to be able to spend on transportation, employee health insurance, retirement and benefits, and some of those property and casualty insurance. And so this brings about $1.5 million to our school district. This was something that was added in the on May 22nd. So this is something you didn't see before that's in the bill now that was approved. I want to bring this slide back up because it kind of talks about really, yes, we got $1.5 million, but we still had an increase in property and casualty insurance of $2,196,000 since 2019. So if you think about it, those funds are really kind of already spent. So they're really not new money, but they do help kind of fund the deficit.
Sorry, say that one more time. I'm just, it's very fast. Just summarize, how much we're getting and how much
Sure. This allotment right here brings about $1,516,000 in that ballpark. It's based on enrolled student. Okay, so it's based on enrollment right now, and we're considering that our pre-Ks are only enrolled half-time at this point as enrolled membership. Okay, it's $106 per enrolled student, and it can go to. So they didn't put things in the basic allotment because they wanted to have a little bit of control how we spent it. So they're calling this an allotment of basic cost. And so we get the additional money. However, what I'm just trying to point out here is since 2019, when the last time we really kind of saw an increase, these are the increases that our district has experienced since 2019. So when you look at that new money, we've really kind of already spent that. That was part of our deficit that we were seeing before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was just looking at some of those numbers, 1.5 million new, and that doesn't get close to any of those.
No, ma'am.
Right.
Okay. So the teacher retention allotment is a new one as well. So this is really exciting for our teachers, I'm not gonna lie. Provides $2,500 for teachers for classroom, in the classroom 3 to 4 years experience, and $5,000 for teachers 5+ years. So this is really kind of going on because I think it's a positive that we adopt a July budget because I think it really helps our school district. It helps our campuses, and that's what we're here for. It gets a little harder when you're adopting a July 1st, when you've had a legislative session with this much change and trying to interpret the laws before you really have final interpretation. Does that make sense? So they are saying in the law that it's based on TEC 5.001. In that legislation, Texas Education Code, it says that means a classroom teacher that teaches 3 to 4 hours a day in instructional setting, or CTE, okay? So we have some dyslexia teachers, we have some ESL. We would think that could fall under that legal rules. However, when I pulled the file that TEA was using to make our runs to legislators, it had listed those positions as non-applicable. So at this time, that's how we're standing it. Classroom teachers only. If you want to talk PEMS code, that's like an 087 record. It's a classroom teacher. Okay? And there's a lot of other rules that they put in. So a little bit, you're going to hear me say something about pre-K eligible students for all classroom teachers. And so we're going to have to put teachers' kids in pre-K. They're going to be eligible, no cost to the teacher, if you're a classroom teacher. Does that make sense? And then it's even been posed in legislation to legislators and TEA, what if you don't have capacity? And they said, like when we did this before, you could opt out until you had capacity to go to a full day pre-K. They said there's not an option. So that's where we are right now.
So it has to fall under that definition for pre-K.
We're thinking because they use the same, yes, sir. Okay.
And quick question, just because we get questions on it, the 0 to 2 teachers were excluded because this is retention, right?
Yes, sir.
Those are our new teachers. They either haven't gotten experience, they only have 1 or 2. Okay.
Can I ask, and tell me if we're going to talk about this later. I know that some other districts, because of that uncertainty on that definition, have discussed not approving, even though House Bill 2 signed, they've discussed not approving their budget based on that because it's so unknown and still a question. I don't know if that, I mean, if you're going to talk about that at all.
We're going
or
to talk about it later, and I think it's just the stance our district wants to have. And so do we want 2 salary scales? Those are the decisions we're going to make. Because there are people that are excluded on that scale that doesn't have to do with an ELC and a dyslexia. We know for sure our instructional coaches are on that scale. Our
on it or excluded
teachers,
or, sorry.
they're on our teacher pay
They
scale.
are.
And so are our enrichment specialists, our MTSS, so there's a lot of other pay families just on other than the ESL and the dyslexia teacher that are on that teacher pay scale. On that teacher pay scale are also nurses and librarians. And we know those are excluded. So it's a decision of the district. Do you exclude those from the raise and give them a different raise and build 2 salary schedules from now on, or do you put them on? So I think it's something to look at. I've got it run both ways, and then it's a decision of the district. Now, we can hold off, but we're talking, the only ones we'd have question on are less than 30 teachers. What about counselors? Counselors on the administrative pay scale. But you're exactly right. We're going to talk about that too, because yes, with counselors, they're not going to see that type of a raise as well. Okay, so when you're looking at another allotment they gave us on May 22nd is $45 per regular program allotment, or ADA. So that money goes to funding raises for these. So it can fund the raises for those other people that were left off the schedule: counselors, librarians, nurses, teachers' assistants, custodian staff, food service, bus drivers, administrative. It's basically everybody in the district except for administrators. Administrators cannot be utilized with this money. So this is a little over $500,000 for our school district. And it is another allotment. Now, they think these allotments are permanent, but as you see with the 30% being repealed, we know at any time they can repeal the allotments or move the money around. Same thing that we're going to talk about early education, because that's exactly what's happening there. Special education allotment, they're going to do a lot. It's going to be based on the commissioner's development of intensity and deciding how much money gets funded for those. So they've set aside money for sped increases, but we're not going to see that until 26, 27, okay? Because it's going to take a while for him to make those decisions, and then we've got to back that into our software program so that we can track the students a different way. It's also going to give us $1,000 per special education evaluations. So if we have, 500 evaluations, that money will go to that. We'll turn those in, we'll get reimbursed for those evaluations. Now, please understand what it says next to that. Student does not have to be enrolled with our school district. So if that student's going to a charter, a private school, homeschool, we still have to do the evaluations. They think we're still going to get the $1,000 for that. It's basically said per child. It doesn't say enrolled child. Okay, so we're hoping we'll still get that. The dyslexia allotment, it's going to make it where we can include the kids that don't have, if they don't have it listed on their IEP, we'll still be able to get the funding on that. So we hope to see a little bit of increase in dyslexia allotment as well. I think it's current. It goes in this one. Okay, so compensatory education, nothing moved really on that one, but a big, big, big thing happened here. We get an allotment based on our free and reduced students, and then we have to spend 55% of that on low social and economical, but it has to meet these guidelines. They've repealed that. So basically you get the additional money. The requirements to spend 55% of that money on those type students is gone, which kind of is not going to make it very equitable per school districts, because some school districts are going to allot of this money that they are not going to have to spend in those mechanisms. And then some of us, like we're a lower social economical district, and so we're going to get a little less money. But those requirements to spend the money that way have been removed from legislation. And that's pretty big. Bilingual education allotment, nothing's really moved in the weights. However, they've allowed us to spend the money on teachers. Before, we couldn't spend it on bilingual teachers, certified teachers. Now we're allowed to spend that money that away. And then there's this little caveat that they're doing. They have $10 million set aside where they're going to look at TEA-approved alternative legislation, language education, and they're going to redistribute that money. I've talked to our school district, and they feel like our program qualifies, so that is unknown at this time, but that's something that we'll watch for in the future. Career and technology, they're going to start funding JROTC courses, and then they're going to move the P-TECH funding from $50 per student to $150 per student. And so we'll generate a little bit of money. Some school districts, they did a new tech campuses a few years ago. They've repealed that. They no longer fund for that. CCMR, this is not going to be a lot of money for our district, but it did move it. If we qualify for special education amount, moves from $2,000 to $4,000. Early education, this is a big one that we're really going to have to watch, because we received this money back in House Bill 3, and when they said we're going to move pre-K from half day to full day, you can use this money for that, but you can also use it for reading academies and anything for K through 3, okay? So we have this money that we've been kind of using to help fund the second half of the pre-K program. We're going to generate the money like we have before, but the state's going to pick it up and take it away from the district, and then redistribute the money back to the district based on how many kids you have in your pre-K program. So the runs right now show that we'll still be able to keep all of our money. Some school districts are going to be upside down on this allotment, so they're going to actually lose some of their early ed money. It looks like we're going to have about $221,000 left over when they reallocate based on our estimates. However, they added math academies. And so where we had reading academies before, now we have math academies that we're now going to have to go through. And then we're required to pay stipends on those, and there's some other kind of caveats that are going to be a cost of that additional money. Safety allotment, we're excited about that. Per campus moved from $15,000 to $33,540. If you remember last time, that was $34,000. They saved a little money. They moved it to $33,540, but they left per student 10 to 20. So we pretty well doubled on our safety allotment, so that's exciting. The additional days, they corrected something in the rule where they really thought if we go into summer school, they'll help us with some of those costs through a funding mechanism, but we had to go 180 days. Most school districts in the state of Texas don't go to school that long anymore, so they made it right. They moved it back to 175 days so that you could start receiving that money. So we'll kind of watch and see what that means for our school district. Of course, I've already touched on pre-kindergarten. a classroom teacher's kid may send their kid for free to pre-kindergarten. There's some other things in there where we can't allow or can't charge other people that are not eligible unless there are not seats in other pre-K programs. But I don't think we do that, so we don't have to worry about it. Certification exam reimbursement, we used to get one reimbursement, now we get two. So that's a positive. And then transportation allotment went from $1.08 for SPED students to $1.13. So that brings in a couple, 10,000. Yeah. Only for
That's
SPED.
interesting. Is the pre-K go into effect in the fall
It's supposed to, as far as I know.
for teachers?
There's some other things out there that you can kind of watch. Teacher certification incentive, that's really kind of weird. It talks like if you, the one rule I read where if you were non-certified in 22, 23, or 23, 24, and you were certified by January 1st of 2025, you received $1,000. But it's not going to fit the mode for a lot of people. So, and then preparing for retaining educators through a partnership program. We're starting that here in College Station this next school year. So we'll kind of watch that and see if we can get a little bit of additional funding. And it's capped at 40 participants per district. These are some really big ones that affect what we're going to talk about when we talk about truth in taxation rules and other things. The homestead exemption has increased from 100,000 to 140,000. Okay. In addition, on the ballot in November, there's going to be there where we can increase the exemption for homeowners over 65 or disabled from 10,000 to 65. So that's a 50,000. So they could get a $90,000 homestead exemption. Okay. The positive is, so when this happens, technically, we'll look at the cups later, but what they take from our local, they'll fund with the state. Where it catches you when you go into your INS funding. So you're looking at that tax rate, and now you've got less value. So that means you have to increase your tax rate. The positive is we just sold our $150 million. We're going to make a payment before September 1, so it's going to be held harmless. So that's a positive. We just have a little bit more to sell on our bond program that will not be held harmless. This will come into effect where we'll have less property value to tax on, so it could increase your tax rate. We still have money in our tax rate. We're going to hold our tax rate the same for this school year, and I think we'll be fine.
And the hold harmless is just for a year or for ongoing?
Until the legislation.
Change their mind again?
Yes. But it's in there. All right. We'll kind of get into the budget. So these are some of the things that we did. We relocated funds to campus, and what that really kind of meant is when you look at our formulas, we were funding some of the money out for low socioeconomic and giving some of those campuses additional funds. However, they get that money for Title I. We were giving them some of that state comp ed money, and then we started making a shift. So some money went to the central office for campuses. Might be SPED, might be instructional technology, might be science programs, might be just your pre-K programs and other things like that. So it would come here, so a teacher on a campus could get money from their campus, but then we would, for enrichment, for other things, we would take dollars and put it there. So we were, in a sense, kind of double dipping. And so what we're trying to do is put that money back on a campus and then allow them to prioritize their needs based on their dollars. Now, they still have to do the set aside, and so we still have to set aside so much money for pre-K programs and GT programs, but that money, instead of being housed at Central, is housed on a campus. Okay, so we really kind of looked at that. We reestablished the staffing models and went through that. So you're going to kind of see where there's some shifts where we looked at instructional aides, we looked at the 22-to-1, we looked at the 25 at our intermediate and up, as well as when you add a intermediate, when you add a principal, a counselor, things like that. So we kind of looked at all of those things, and we did that through our staffing models. We studied everything, we got together, and we kind of looked where we were, and we were made sure we were equitable between campuses. We reviewed departments based on essential, achievement, and enhancement. So if you had a department budget, you really had to do a lot more work this year and build your budget based on essential, achievement, and enhancement. And then staff went through every one of those budgets, line item by line item. We worked with departments to reduce expenditures, and so there was a lot of information where I pulled a lot of data from a lot of different school districts just to show kind of where we are cost per student based on where our district was cost per student. Because you remember when we look at supplies and stuff like that, we were extremely high there, but we might be on the lower end on salaries. And so we really took a deep dive into what that looked like and pulled it back a little. Now, we did not pull it back to where the average is in the state of Texas per dollar per spend in those departments, but we did pull it back a large amount. Okay, so I feel good about where we're at. We could move more. We worked with those departments, and then we trained staff on effective budgeting. I think accounting can be fun, but I don't know if everybody else can. But anyway, we spent a lot of time training on what it looks like to build your budget, what it looks like for effective budgeting, how you best spend your budget. We talked about different types of budgeting. We talked about how to count code. So what was going on in the district, and that is districts can be run different ways, but where my comfort level is not maybe to the same as some others. I feel like the campus should build a sound budget, departments build a sound budget, put your money based on your plan. And so we talked a lot of that. What was happening before is, and which has caused some heartache this year, I'm not gonna lie, but when I visited with principals at the end of the year, they were really excited about the process. They really liked purchase order cutoffs because, and honestly, their purchase orders are cut off in April, and their busiest time that's somewhat crazy is May, and they don't even have to worry about that. They can pick it back up, look at capital outlay items and make those final purchases, but they were really excited about how it went. It was just about building some procedures. But we were allowed to spend when there wasn't money in the budget account. And so we kind of moved that around. Like, for example, some departments might not have had any money for certain things, and other departments had money, and so they were just sharing, like, I'll send you on a training, and stuff like that. But so we've kind of worked really hard, and the district has worked extremely hard, and they have been kind to this accounting can be fun person. So, but it's been a hard process. We increased campus budgets even though we went down on enrollment by 75,640. A lot of that is just reallocating those funds back to the campus. We also made them equitable, so they were based on the type of students they were serving on their campus, and so some campuses went up, some went down, okay? So that's kind of where we're at there.
Is that a total number or an average number?
Nope, that's the total number.
Total, okay.
Yes, ma'am. So if you take all of my campus, that's the total number that we increased their budgets, even though enrollment went down. But we now have baselines, and we can see how it works for them this next coming year, and then know if we need to move the mark or we're good to go. So we set them at this, but we're going to monitor and make sure that they have what they need.
Let me mention briefly of why this money is going back to the campus level. So for some reason, money here had been earmarked at the district level for campuses to use, which is kind of odd to me because that's the campus's job. So we would have money earmarked in a particular category that we would ration out to campuses. Some campuses had a need for that expenditure. Other campuses did not have a need for that expenditure. So whether they had a need or not, they would spend the money so they didn't lose the money. So in this case, it's going back to the campuses, and principals and their teams can decide where the money's needed versus it's in one little silo that's got to be spent there. It's not efficient, it's not effective. So the money's going back to them to use as they see fit, because every year needs will vary based on what's going on during that particular school year.
Okay. So when you look at this, there are two slides here, but the total savings in salaries is $890,000. And so basically, we didn't really cut anything. It's just we're losing students. So it's really inefficient. It's just making sure we're staying efficient. So it's keeping those ratios 22-1. By keeping them at 22-1, we were able to reduce 7 teachers. We looked at efficiencies on aides when we went through that staffing model, and we reduced instructional aides by 6. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of hard for some campuses, and it's been a lot of discussion, but it's where we need to be. Intermediate counselors, when we looked at our staffing model, we needed another counselor at one of our intermediate campuses. We had a reduction of a counselor here at the district office, and so that position was actually moved to the campus. So that's a net zero wash there. We established 25 class constants at middle schools and high schools. That's been the case. That was the case last year, but it's just looking at that and making sure we don't have inefficiencies. And Panay and her group really kind of looked at that, and we were able to save 1 middle school teacher and 7 high school teachers. However, we do have ads. When we look at SPED and we look at the minutes, we needed an additional 6 instructional aides. And so what we saved, we just added back. And then we increased 2 resource teachers, 1 life skills teacher, and then we moved the SPED instructional coach to homebound teacher. So we covered the need there within. And then we reduced a SPED coordinator. We also increased a DIAG. However, we had to have those services, and so we were consulting out for those services. So we're going to be able to decrease that budget item and then put it back in a salaried position. That means that we have control on how they're doing their jobs. So that's a lot what's going on there. We saved, and if you add all these numbers up, you're not going to get to this number, but when I look at everything, this is a total save. Okay, so when you look at the departments, not considering our fine arts, our athletics, and our CTE, but maybe mainly our central office departments, we saved $799,441 out of the budget. Now that's total, because I've got a lot of ads that had to go back in here too. So you have your attorney fees, and what was going on here is there was attorney fees on multiple different budgets. So you've got a budget based on worst case here, you've got a budget worst case here. I mean, some people were putting $25,000 to increase attorney fees. What that needs to happen is a central budget that we know worst case scenario, and we'll control that. And so it could be increase or decrease, no stress to you. We've got it, and we've got it covered. So we moved those all to a central budget. We did the same thing for insurance. And so if you had a vehicle, you had an insurance in your budget. You had an insurance in your budget. So we had them across the board. And so it's basically trying to maintain that. It might go up 10% every year, and then when we get ready to pay the bill, they might not have money in the budget. So now they got to stop, move the money, and do all that. So we centralized insurance as well. And then we know when it increases, we keep it in one bucket, and then we can be more efficient. Departments and campuses, we've kind of just talked about that, eliminating the duplicate budgets. That's where sometimes they were budgeting on campus and then budgeting up here. We moved that back. And so that was some of our savings as well. The district this entire year, and it's nothing that I've done, it's what they did before I got here. They really worked hard on overtime pay, they worked hard on extra duty pay, and then we're going to continue to work hard on substitutes. And so we've got we have a discretionary sub-account that's going to be allocated to every campus, and then we'll kind of monitor that. And then our curriculum departments have subs. Everybody has subs for their training, but this kind of keeps our subs down as well. So we're going to be able to decrease our sub temp budgets and things like that, about $440,000. And then evaluating health insurance every year is just, I think we had a little bit too much in that budget, and so I was able to decrease that budget based on historical cost.
On the previous one, so really previous to that, the new positions added, I mean, is it everything is basically SPED? Is that if we're
Yes,
for new?
every new position
Yeah, just
SPED
clear.
only. There are no other new positions.
And that is primarily based on the need or based on?
Completely based on the need. We looked.
Budget or a combination.
Ms. Grande did an amazing job of looking at every campus. Some moved positions around, and then when we got through everything, we needed additional staff to make up the minutes.
Yeah.
And so that's where the ads came in. It's only SPED. There is another need out there. It's just a little one. It's where when you look at our staffing model, we said you have to have 550 students before you get a receptionist. We have a campus that does not have one, and they have 700 students. However, we were trying to wait for some of those campuses that don't have 550 to leave, and then we would take that position, but we didn't want to do it through attrition, so right now they don't have one. But there's a need based on our staffing models that we have now to add additional staff.
So
Some of the SPED positions also were temporary hires last year in order to meet the minutes. So there's 6 instructional aides, I believe last year, Blair, we had 4 temporary positions that served in that role. So they were already technically part of our budget. So now they're coming full-time employees. And these are minutes that without these new positions, we could not serve the minutes as required by the ORD meeting. And so we don't have a choice. I mean, we've got to be able to serve those minutes.
And then you could kind of see that's probably reflected a little bit in that $439,000 that we're reducing for subs, because we can't double count those positions, build a full-time position and then pay a sub.
Well, good, thank you. And so really you are kind of saying otherwise based on your staffing models is across the district, that's pretty much the only real needs? I mean, I know we've heard a few others recently. But these are, or is this just the priority needs based on?
This is priority needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then realize too, SPED's a moving target. So based on students potentially leaving us, students moving in, uh, requiring more minutes than, we're potentially staffed to give, a student moves in, requires a one-on-one paraprofessional. So that number changes throughout the entire school year, and we just have to adapt and adjust.
And again, I'm not questioning the sped ones, obviously, I mean, that, not at all. I just to clarify, it's more, are there others out there that we're not able to fill because of where we are, with the budget? That's really the question.
And we looked at needs, and for example, there was a definite need to add another person to Oakwood Intermediate School, and that was that, we repurposed that position to that campus. And so there were some needs that we covered. It was just, we try to do it, if we could find something to be more efficient, we would move that position so we wouldn't increase the bottom line. Okay, so here's some of the increases to that budget. So it's reflected on that savings, but we even saved more if you want to get technical because these are large increases. For example, we set aside $200,000. We're doing a curriculum audit right now, but we needed to prepare for what we want to do with curriculum and curriculum writing. So we set aside some money there. The attendance incentive, we want to continue that into the new year, and so we had to set aside money for the attendance incentive. So there's $150,000 set aside there. We are still working on ESSER and rolling that back. So last year we bought custodial supplies about 200,000, I think is about where it was, in custodial supplies out of ESSER funds, that we've got to put that back into the custodial budget. And so that we've got to put that money back. Another one that was caught with ESSER is Microsoft program. That's got to be moved back into the general fund. That was technically paid out of IMA, but when we moved stuff from ESSER back into IMA, that was the one we had to push back to the general fund. So that's an increase in the general fund. In addition, and I don't have the final quote, but we're looking at a financial software replacement system here just to make us more efficient and to be able to do our jobs more effectively.
IMA is instructional materials?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Instructional materials allotment, thank you. And sometimes they even put a T in there, instructional materials and technology.
And for the curriculum development, is that like the stuff that happens in the summer? Is that?
Well, what they're gonna do is spend the year trying to research what they need based on their audit. And then a lot of times when you roll a curriculum out, you're gonna have to buy it in the spring. So you'll buy it in the spring, train on it so that it'll be ready for next school year. So it's really kind of set aside when we make our final decisions, we have money to go ahead and get that curriculum, get it in place.
Thank you.
Aaron, that'll be a big focus for us next year with multiple committees, input from teachers at all grade levels of curriculum. We've had a lot of complaints that curriculum at different levels is not satisfactory to meet their needs, holes in it, whatever that is. So we're going to come through, get the audit, do a report to you guys, maybe at the August workshop or at some point in time to kind of give you the high-arching themes of what that audit's about, and then build some committees at different levels to kind of research, have some thoughts, figure out where the holes are, what's missing. And then there's a plethora of things out there. It's been, I think, overarching ineffective to try to build that ourselves. It's a lot of money we're spending, and it has nothing to do with our teachers and their work. They work hard, but it's an almost an impossible task for a district our size, for our staff, to be able to write a curriculum, adjust, and stay on top of everything versus going out and looking at different curriculums that come ready to go, and that our staff's not has the burden of keeping up with everything. So that will be the discussions next year.
That's great to hear, because I know that, again, married to a teacher, talking about when you can do things, trying to do it in the summer, who can be there, who can't be there, there's vacations, pay, limitations, all this stuff. And then you've got both high schools doing things entirely differently, maybe same context, but now again, you want to give the teachers the freedom to do what they want, but everyone should be getting the same thing for the students. So that's great to hear. I'm glad you guys saw that and identified that. Great job.
All right, and then we worked with the departments. So this is where we work with the athletic department, the CTE budget, and then the fine arts. And those are the percentages that we decrease their budgets, and that's the savings. Okay, so back to this slide that I showed you the first time we looked at budget, kind of where we were kind of had some outliers based on comparative school districts. And of course, we looked at general supplies, that group life insurance where we were really outspending our peer districts. On professional, like your paras, we're outspending our school districts there. And then of course, food makes sense because we're not contracting out our food service department, it's internal. And so that would be a normal thing you would see on things like that. Okay, so to break it down, this is kind of where we're at this point. So contracted services moved a lot, what you're seeing there. However, if you look at supplies, which moved a lot as well, over $1 million decrease in supplies, 800,000, it was really recoding items. And so we caught where we were coding software programs incorrectly. We moved that to contracted services where it needed to go. So you're just seeing a shift. But even without that shift in place, we still decreased supplies a large total. The other ones is miscellaneous expenditures. That's really your 6,400s. And so you can kind of see where we move the mark a lot in those categories.
Do you have a summary for that slide? Like what does all that math reduction turn out to be?
I
You-
don't.
No,
I wish I
okay.
did, but I'll get you one. I can tell you, I think it's 750,000, but I look at them so many times, and so I hate to tell you that. Okay, so I just want to get back to the basics where even with all of this increases, even though property values might go up, property values might go down, we get the same bucket, okay? Our district is not in recapture. With the compression and then the increase in homestead exemption, that will hold College Station ISD out of recapture even longer, okay? But we do have a blessing that we are high property values, so that helps us with our INS tax rate. Yeah, but yes, I guess I shouldn't have said that. The maintenance tax operation, I just want to put this up again because I wanted to talk back through a lot of the shifts going on in legislation is where they're putting their pockets of funds. So you're going to see where tier 1, where we're being supported by our maintenance compressed rate, well, that's like your base tax rate. We'll go over that in a second. Don't worry about that word. And then you add your golden pennies to that, and your golden pennies are funded based on your WADA. So one's funded based on your tier 1, where you're just saying transportation allotment, this, and all of the weights. Typically, when you're doing a per student weight, that goes to tier 2. And so that's really kind of been like, I think, subchapter D of the Texas Education Code 4800. But what's going on there is they're doing a shift in where that's not going to be held the same anymore because now they're putting more items in that subchapter that are exempt from WADA. So that's something to, I mean, there's just a little bit of manipulation going behind the scenes to see some, yeah.
So
Okay,
the bottom line is we're getting less money for each of those golden pennies that we have, right?
Yes.
Because we have the 8.
Yes.
I just a quick comment on, do we ever have any thought of looking at our copper pennies or?
I think it's a discussion that we could have. I think we've kind of gone back and forth about building a committee to look at some of in the future, and that might be a discussion. Do you want to elaborate on that, Dr. Harkrider?
Yeah, I mean, with us just going out for 2 bond elections, it's not anything that I have the appetite to bring up right now. I think it's 100% a discussion point. I think probably becomes a bigger discussion point after the session in 27 of what it looks like. Are we in a similar boat? Do they step up and do a little bit more? If not, then I think the conversation becomes a little bit more serious.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's, some people ask, why do other districts do that, right? But with the and we could go out to the voters and ask them to increase the tax rate so we can bring in some extra money. But one of the really painful things about the copper pennies is we don't get to keep all of that money.
Yes.
A big chunk of that would go back to the state. So not only are we taxing our, local folks more, then we have to send more back. So, I mean, I just wanted to mention that. But that's where some districts have to end up because they're in even worse situations than we are.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
So just to look at kind of what happened here, the effects of it is, yes, we got 630,000 in the increase in basic allotment. We lost 210,000 in tier 2 funding. That's even going to be worse in the second biennium, part of the biennium, because they upfronted our money, and then we'll feel the effects more the second biennium. These pretty much stayed the same, but I wanted to put it in your spreadsheet so that you have them, or your PowerPoint so that you have them. Your House Bill 2 teacher compensation did decrease from 5,500 to 5,000. Still, the funding is $3,612,000. It's going to cost us over $4 million to do that because we have to pick up the benefits on that, which is adding up to about $423,000. On the flip side, to add those additional positions, it's $406,000 to do that.
So I saw other districts take that 406 and the 210 you just had on the other, right? That extra money that we have to pay, that's almost exactly that $55 increase, the six.
It's
Oh, yeah, it
it's
really
within
is.
100,000, I
So
think, yeah.
just to be clear, I mean, even that small basic allotment increase to $55 is really turns out to be no added funds for,
Well,
to
when you
to us.
take
Is that a
this-
good way, kind of a way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't forget too, prior to the session, ran numbers, and to get us to $2019, that basic allotment should have been increased about $1,340. And so we're at 55, the 106 ABC. So you're at, you didn't touch the bottom line per se. It's better than nothing. Obviously, it's better than it was at our May workshop where we took a deeper dive. It's where we are right now, and we've just got to try to make the most of it.
Another thing is the $45. So if you take the $45, the new allotment for other, but including the teachers, and then the retention, it about washes. So this is where we're at. So I know this is a confusing slide, but I just want to put up where we were in 24-25. Current law, because we're losing students, we would have decreased the budget $2 million. The difference between this side and what I showed you last month is we did have to add an additional sped in a few paraprofessional positions, which kind of moved that mark a little. And then I thought the easiest way to look at this is to say, okay, if we had no raises, and we know we have required raises, but if we have no raises, we would have a surplus of $4.5 million. So that when we get to that compensation slide, you can really see what the effect of the raises are, okay? Okay, so let's talk compensation. I wanted to put this slide in your slide deck because I had some questions about this at the board meeting. That final column are the increases on a monthly basis for health insurance in our school district. Another thing, when we looked at how we compare to other school districts, we outspent our other school districts in health insurance. And that's really kind of, we were looking at taking those monies instead of paying additional on the health insurance, hoping to reroute that sum to salaries. And so I just want to kind of bring that up as well. And I also want to bring this back to the forefront because this is where we are at College Station ISD, and we aren't the highest paying school district in our area. This isn't the first time we've showed this. We've known this is something that we've got to tackle and look into, but I wanted to bring it to your attention again. And then we've gotten some questions about the administrative, on the taper, administrative salaries at Central and how we're above state average. And so I wanted just to take a little bit of time to just explain a few things here. And then Dr. Harkrider might want to step in. But if you look, I kind of marked that red line is the state average. And so what really kind of happens, and you can kind of look at that, larger school districts are on your high end, some of your lower school districts are on your low end. But then what you also have to understand is Texas is a very large state. And so if you kind of look on the low end, you're going to see the Friendship and the Canyon because they're in the Panhandle and that's their pay scales. But then also look at, when you look at rural districts, you're going to see where we're a large rural district, and so where we're high in our ADA, we kind of stand alone. So we've got to recruit to a rural district, and that's some of the factors. The other factors in are how you code this. So when you look at the state average, what they're going to do is pick up all your central staff, for example. So they might pick up an AD, some chief officers, your CFO, your superintendent, and things like that. So they're going to take, okay, that's how much your district costs. But they're also going to take a district that only has 1,000 students in it, and they're going to pick up those costs. And if you look at Texas, we have a lot of those. There's not a lot of large districts. And then they're going to take that district, big districts, middle-sized districts, and they're going to put them all together, and they're going to come out with an average. And so when you kind of look at our peer district, I think it's explanatory where we're at. We've been here for about 12 years now. It could have been further, but that's how much data we have. But that's what we're looking at. Do you want to add to that?
Matt?
Just clarify, when you say state average of what?
State of Texas when it comes to central staff. So they've kind of got it broken out like.
Central administration salaries, Josh, of all school districts in Texas.
Okay, but so that doesn't take into account, say, for example, we're close to Belton. So the number of people at central office.
It can. So it could work in the number. So like if I coded in my PEMS, like 50 positions, I would have a high range to a low range. And if I coded 50 positions, that would bring my average down. So I kind of think that's what's happening with Brian, why they're so low, is they have a lot more coded as their administrative staff and a wider range of the average. You know what I'm saying? So it brings their average down. If I code less people for PEMS as a central administration, that's going to bring my average up. So you've got some of that playing in as well. It depends on how you code it in PEMS.
Yeah, so, but if we have a central office staff of 20 people,
We have 15. I have it right here. We have 15.
15,
Belton has 21.9.
okay. So, okay, so they have 6 more people that are classified. So they're spending more on central office, even though the average is very similar.
Correct. And that goes back to that slide, and I should have put it in here again, where when you look at how much we spend on administration, we're on the lower end.
That's what I just wanted to clarify. 'Cause-
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is important to have too, that slide where we've seen before that our total average, our percent of our overall budget and in central admin
Is lower.
Is lower.
I believe that's part of our first rating, and we're below that average and get 10 points for it.
Right.
And a half, yes, ma'am.
So they're really not comparing apples to apples. And so people really, when they go out and just look at the one piece of data, it's not
Correct.
representative.
TASB will tell you if you really want to get an accurate comparison, you've got to compare like-sized districts or you're comparing apples and oranges. And it
'Cause I pulled this week, I pulled College Station, Bryan, Tomball, Magnolia, Belton. We had 15 classified as central administration. Bryan has 39. Tomball has 27.7, Magnolia has 38.6, and Belton has 21.9. And we are middle of the road of those 5 districts, comparatively speaking, as far as our 129 number, whatever that is.
And historically, we've had the
Since
smallest.
2012, we've had the smallest central administration, and since 2012, we've always been above the state average. And I never thought to ask about it, I guess. That's my
Well,
fault.
but just to be clear, because we've had a lot of questions on this, what we're saying is we have 15 times our average is what we're spending on central admin. Somebody else may have a lower average, but they could have 39 people, and so really they're spending more on their admin than we are. So it's very hard to just look at an average in a chart like that and be able to tell what each district is doing.
Yeah, you have to, like, as McAdams said, you have to have both those data points for it to be.
So I really appreciate showing this data and especially, I mean, explaining why, College Station is where we are and Bryan is where, particularly Bryan stands out as in the low end there, but yeah, they have more than twice as many people that they're counting in that
Which will
bucket.
bring their
So,
average down.
I wouldn't
does
say on
make
the
me
low end.
question- say
Wouldn't say on the low end, I would just say less. I wouldn't consider that necessarily low.
That's below the state, it's below state average, so yeah, but
Well,
yeah.
It's just that there's more to the story than those numbers tell.
Exactly.
I don't know what Brian's numbers are doing, but they may have more people coded, so they have some that are on a lower salary and some that are on a higher, and it's just being brought down.
Well, and I don't even know that if it's manipulated, but I do think, it seems like PEMS should be more clear about how to, I don't know if that's just a problem in general, that there should be some more clarity about how things should be coded, so you are comparing apples to apples, like you said, Heather.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so here is the compensation and how it works out. So I've got 2 slides here. I'm going to go between this slide and this slide. And to make it as easy as possible, because I know there's a lot of numbers on here, let me explain what I did here. So this slide, when you look at teachers, librarians, and nurses, that includes everyone that is on our current teacher pay scale, okay? And what I did with this number is I gave them the same salary across the board that everyone qualified. So if you were had 3 or 4 years experience, you got 2,500. If you had 5 and above, you got the 5,000. If you had less, you got a less percentage, okay? And so that was included on the top line. And then I looked at 2, 3, 4, and 5. And something else that I did on a couple of these pay scales, especially the administrative professional and the clerical, is we walked the salary table up. We only walked the salary table up 3%, but what happened with the law is now our daily rate of our teachers are $27 more per day. So when you compare the daily rate to a teacher with 0 years of experience, when you went to the administrative pay scale, the 0 years of experience was making more than my 0 years of experience as a counselor. It was making more, it was making about the same amount as my 0 years experience as AP. So we needed to move those just a little. We moved them 3%. It could be as much as $20 a day. It doesn't really drive a lot of the increase. It only takes your mid, min, and max. We give raises on minimum, and you just now have a little bit higher minimum salary scale that you're giving. But then hopefully we'll give enough raise that it'll all flush out. But we've got to be able to hire for these positions, and a lot of times you have to take a pay cut to become a AP per day or a counselor, okay? And those people are on the administrative pay scale. That goes with our art facilitators too. When they moved the art facilitators, they took them off the teacher pay scale, put them on an administrative pay scale. So they're not going to experience the same raises our classroom teachers are going to experience, okay? So you've got a 2, 3, 4, and 5%. So this is the new rates. I moved clerical positions as well, but this is the new rates. If you look at the very bottom, because I just said we had a 4.5 million surplus. I just then took each category off that surplus. And so if you gave a 2% raise across the board, you're looking at a $1.1 million deficit, 3%, 1.6, 4%, 2.1, and 5%, 2.6 for the most part.
And
Okay,
to
so
reiterate that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
To reiterate, that puts everybody on that top line. Every single person that's on our teacher pay scale, even the ones that did not qualify technically under House Bill 2, get the exact same raise. And now she'll show you the next slide a little bit different. You're still going to have a deficit. It's going to be less. In our opinion, as an administrative team, all of the folks on that teacher pay scale work with kids, all of them. And it's hard for me to justify not giving everyone the same raise and benefit, regardless of what the state's intent was, because they all do the same work. And so it's tough for me. I can't recommend having multiple scales. To me, it should be one. They all work with kids. We should all treat them the same.
This is the same information. However, it gave different raises to our teachers based on the percentage. So for example, 2% would be about $1,225 for all the teachers that didn't qualify. 3% would be $1,825, 4% $2,425, and 5% $3,035. So that would be their raises based on these scales if we didn't put them all on the teacher scale. Then the district would have 2 different teacher pay scales, one with teacher retention, one without.
You're looking at about a $300,000 difference between everybody getting the same and not. In the grand scheme of things, in my opinion, it's a win-win from a morale standpoint and money well spent. It also, this is our chance, because a lot of things that we heard during our cabinet visits were compensation. You know, obviously our team has been in place now for 2 years. I can't fix compensation scales in a year. However, this is an opportunity for us to get super competitive, because everybody's not going to do this. If you've got a leeway as a district, you've got to decide, does everybody get that $2,500 or $5,000? If you've got the funds to do it, absolutely. If you don't, you're not going to be able to do it. Same thing with administrative, clerical, and auxiliary. Everybody's on their own as far as that goes, of what they're going to do, because you're coming up with your own money per se to make that happen. To me, it's our chance for our hourly folks, clerical, admin, for everybody, for us to take a step up and get higher up on that food chain versus trying to hang around in the middle. I know it's, and I'm totally honest, a little bit of a gamble. We know what things are going to look like for a couple of years. We don't know what 27 looks like. But guys, funding in Texas hasn't been right in 100 years. It's not going to get fixed in the next 100. To me, we deal with the here and now and get aggressive when we can be aggressive.
Yes, sir.
And can I ask a thought? You're saying, like, again, everybody on that pay scale for the teacher specifically would, on that top line, would get the 5,000 and, no, or they'd get these percentages.
If you're a teacher, under HB2, you get your 5 or your 25.
If you, again, if by TA's definition.
Correct.
And then we have this other group of folks that are,
We're having to pick up the rest.
and but they would, I just want to clarify, they're not getting the 2, 3, 4, they would be getting
Correct.
5,000 and 2,500, like
This
all the.
first
right.
slide.
That's why I just want to make sure that's
Except
very,
for 0, 1, and 2.
because that's
Then
the
they
same
would
as
get the
after-
5%, the 4%, 3, or 2. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
okay.
So really 1 and
Yes.
2.
And I think
And-
mathematically, the $5,000 raise is 8% increase.
Yeah, or it depends on where you
Yeah,
are.
it's-
Yeah,
yeah.
Depending where you are, it's,
Depending on where you are,
yeah,
it's
but
roughly.
you're somewhere between potentially, 7 to almost 10%. Yeah. You're higher than the 5.
Under HB2.
Correct.
Those that are-
We would be filling the gap to put all those that didn't, teacher, librarian, instructional aides, all of those folks, we would be picking up the tab for that.
So.
There's no money coming for
I
that.
think that, I just want to clarify.
Okay, so what it would look like, for example, if you gave a 4% to the non-required versus giving them the full amount, it'd be 2,425. So maybe your 1 and 2 would get 2,425. You get 2,500 for 3 and 4, and then 5,000 for the rest. So that's kind of how it would wash out. If you gave a 5%, then you're going to give a little bit more to your 1 and 2 because they're going to get 3,000. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to get 3,000. So they'll get a little bit more than what the state would have done.
Yeah, 2,500 is not that.
Do we have any questions, or do you guys, can you kind of give us a little bit of a direction, kind of where you're feeling? Because we've got to build you a budget for.
Yeah, this is not a vote, just as a
Not a
reminder,
vote,
but
just-
you feel free to share your thoughts.
So how do
So-
we maintain, like, we adopt this, let's say we go with the 5%. How do we make this work? $2.5 million. Where's that money? Are we just hoping we,
Fund balance.
Yeah,
Fund balance, yeah.
okay.
Well,
it's fund balance, but then it just means coming into next year, we're going to continue to look hard and make sure there's not any more efficiencies that we can gain.
You could take, for instance, as well, last year and this year, going through this budget process, we as a district have saved somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million. Okay, so there's your 3% raise. It's about 1 percentage point for $1 million. So there's $3 million right now. By us becoming more efficient, we could pass along, in addition to more, if that's what you guys want to do, to our employees, versus that whole being $5 million by not making any decisions to reduce spending.
What is our fund balance right now?
Right here. So we ended the year with 43.9 million. That's total. Unassigned was 38 million. We need to keep a 3-month balance. So we will add to that fund balance because we're doing the 10 versus 12. So it'll be a one-time infusion to our fund balance.
Of how much again? Because I mean, I do think that's important.
I expect it to be close to 6 million.
About 6.
So are you comfortable if we wanted to do the 5%?
You're asking a CFO if she's coming.
I know that's a hard question, but.
She's not sweating
Hey, well,
when
can
you
I-
ask that. No, no, I'm joking. She is sweating,
No,
but she's
I'm
gonna be all
sweating
right.
profusely, but there's a thing with, I know it's right. And yes, I'm not comfortable with it, no, but
Okay, that makes sense. That's valid.
And I tell you what, before we get into that discussion, and I'm just one of 7, but I think first we ought to decide if we're gonna do like Dr. Harkrider suggested, which is everybody gets the same raise as opposed to this 2-tier system where some teachers are getting the HB2 money and some aren't and so forth. And
It's not
looks
even
like,
that big of a difference is the reality. Like,
I mean,
it doesn't,
having looked at this, and sat on the board in my 6th year now, we've adopted a whole lot worse deficits than 2.6. We just have. I know us 3 for sure.
back a couple of slides. I I mean, we're more at not this and at this,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
I think I-
That's where, I mean, so I'll speak on my behalf of where I'm at. The 5%, 2.6 million deficit doesn't scare me because I know what we're going through. I know what this year's been like, having to sit and watch the legislation, having to go through the last biennium. I mean, there's no easy way to make it. You hit it right. Does it scare you? Heck yeah, it should. But is it the right thing to do? 100%. Because now it's 4 or 5%. Yeah, I get it. You're looking at pennies on the dollar there. I hate to say that, but that's what it is. But I'm for this type of scale because I don't agree with HB2 that you basically excluded XYZ, and that's not right. And Dr. Harkrider said it right. Every person that's an employee of this district is involved in the kid's life, some facet or form. And I'm going to sit here all day and tout. I'm here to do whatever we can, as long as visiting with you, all of us, talking to administration, as long as everybody's on a comfort level that, yeah, it makes us nervous, but yes, we can do that. Okay, that's where I'm at.
Remember too, starting in the 26-27 school year, vouchers are going to be in play. And I think it's imperative that we are aggressive with keeping great staff members here to continue to be able to lead to success that we have, because competition is on. I mean, it is wide open across the state starting in 26-27. And if we're not taking care of our business, we're going to lose kids at a faster rate. And then it becomes even more problematic from a budgeting standpoint.
Well, and you mentioned in the last 2 years, we've saved about $2 to $3 million. Now, I'm not saying that's that's how I'm going to justify it, but y'all have worked hard to find that and have proven that to us so that we can understand and feel comfortable with whatever decision does get made. And so that was just kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling of, hey, y'all have done the work to help us to at least consider these 4 options here, or 8, I guess.
And it's not as, I'm with you, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean, it's not great. And I think no one's really thrilled about what happened, but I think this would send a message that we do want to support our teachers. They are so important to us. And I would like to see us give it the most we can get, because if, like I said, you're not comfortable, but it is the right thing to do. And I'm, like Dr. Harkrider said, we don't want to lose those teachers.
No, and then something else I do want to bring up, because it is a hardship on our administrative staff in a sense, because usually you find the best teachers become the best APs, become the best principals, become the best counselors. Your best teachers are getting your teacher incentive allotment. And so that's another cost that we're not considering. So when you look at this staff that we're excluding, we would be excluding from the raise our instructional coaches that are implementing our curriculum on our campuses. There are enrichment specialists. There are ESL, dyslexia, our MTSS. Those are excluded. But guess what? Our counselors, our nurses, those people are excluded from TIA as well. And so it's going to make it even harder to recruit amazing people to lead our teachers if we continue to exclude them.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Although I'm sorry, I thought, I know you list up here teachers, librarians, and nurses in that first bucket but I thought
Counselors are an administrative pay scale.
okay, but then there was some of those others that you just listed, like ESL, dyslexia, and enrichment.
They don't qualify.
I know they don't under House Bill 2, but I thought
That extra money could be spent towards that, but it can be spent towards bus drivers, counselors, everybody.
so, but it's not in that first line. That's what I was trying to clarify
They're
earlier.
in the first line.
They are in the first line. Okay, got it. Sorry. Okay.
They're just not all listed there, Kimberly. Yes. Yeah.
We're all on the same page with this type of scale as opposed to
This page is to the next.
this page as opposed to the
Yes, I
second.
think that's the first question too. I am too. So, yes.
Okay, I know we can't vote.
I
but
think the
just
next
need-
question though,
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of gives y'all some direction, unless anybody has anything beyond that.
So.
We'll also, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Just next step, so we'll kind of take those numbers and put them into our accounting system and then rerun everything, okay?
And then we would
So you
come in
could see-
June and you guys would approve the compensation scale, and then you would improve the entire budget.
I think the second question here is I hadn't really addressed the 3, 4, 5% part of it. I mean, I agree with, this page versus the second one, right? But then the second question is how much of a deficit are we willing, to have? And so you asked to me, the right question. We have to start with what we have in our fund balance, and that number is, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking basically, once you put that extra 6 in there, it'll be like 50, right? Right? It's the 38
Yeah.
or 43 plus an
That's your
extra
total
6.
fund balance. I'm gonna go back to the page because you've got to take into account that you're really looking at the 38. So you put the 6 with the 38.
So, I mean, so extra over what we need to keep in there is how much? 10, 12? I mean, that we will,
Yeah, not a lot, but yes, we're getting close.
and I'm in my brain thinking, if we will have that extra in our savings, and if we, so however many years that could last us to spend a deficit, have it. You're right, no, because there are so many unknowns going forward. You don't know if you'll ever get any more money. I mean, I certainly appreciate the savings the district's had, but I mean, how much more can that, you can't get $2-3 million savings every year forever, right? It's just, you can't keep squeezing it,
No,
so.
we can't, but if we're losing kids, you're gonna reduce the bottom line because you're gonna have to lose staff members because you wouldn't need them
We'll
all.
lose yeah,
So,
yeah.
That's the,
Yeah.
that's the rub. To me, I think we've got the best product in town. And I think we've got to step up. And like I said, it's just a matter of not putting pressure on you guys. I think we're all kind of speaking the same language, is to be aggressive. And I think it's a shot in the arm for our staff, and does nothing but motivate them to continue to do great stuff. And, to showcase the great work from our kids is from the staff that works with them. And, we need to continue to establish with choice out there, and maybe some folks go and try something else, but that we continue to entice them to come back to us.
Can I, one other thing? I think one other thing we've been talking about through all this, some of the other savings you talked about increasing class sizes and some of those things, streamlining, saving some money there, right? I mean, I said I'm not really a fan of it. I think it is, by definition, a little more on a teacher's plate. But the whole idea that we've been talking about is having some of that savings available to give back to the teachers. It really is why, when you go back and look at that comparison between why our average salaries are lower than, some of the other districts, it's because we have had, smaller class size. So it's a trade-off, and I just want people, I mean, I recognize that, and I do also support it that money going back to the teachers as much as we can. So it's part of my rationale.
You touched on something when you said it's the right thing to do, and then Dr. Harkrider brought up that vouchers are coming. So if you look historically at what we have some great ideas in this country, creating national parks and infrastructure. One of the great ideas we've had in this country is public education, is creating the opportunity for everybody to attend school, to get an education, to create opportunity for a better life. What the governor and these legislators have done has not helped that by, like you said, the average rate since 2019, they didn't give us any new funding. We should have got about $1,300 per kid. They give us $55 per kid, and then some additional with restrictions. Okay, that's helpful. What the district here has done is say, okay, how can we maximize this? And I think you guys have done a tremendous job in trying to keep everyone employed, trying to figure out how we can give raises, trying to keep all the campuses open. Because the dire straits are, I mean, we had some cuts in there with some other things. You're looking at significant cuts. You're looking at significant problems if you can't cover this with general fund. And being able to make this work with a deficit budget based on what we hope happens for the future. And then let's say the voucher, I don't even know what it ended at. It'll become billions of dollars that Texas taxpayers will put towards private schools. So we're going to give you a voucher to send your kid to a private school. Let's say the private school is charging $30,000 a year. Well, I'm just going to increase my rate by another $10,000 and make it $40,000 a year because I just got a free $10,000 from the government. So if I'm single parent who says, oh, I have $10,000, I can send my kid to private school. Well, no, you can't, because you can't afford the other 30. And oh, by the way, you're going to take public tax dollars, put them in a private organization, no responsibility to do accommodations, They're not required to do sped. They're not even required to take your kid. There's no state testing that comes with it. There's no reporting out that comes with it. So again, the larger picture of what our governor pushed and what these legislators have done has not favored public education. And I think it's a complete disservice and a disgrace to try and present it as such. Just my 2 cents. I commend the district on what you guys are doing and making the most of this. How excited you get talking numbers and saying like, look, I found some money. That's great. And I commend you guys and all of our staff for what you guys are doing. So thank you. But our legislators are not supporting public education.
Well, not when 90-something% of kids in Texas go to public school. They sure aren't. It's,
And there's not private schools in every district.
yeah.
There's not readily available private schools for rural Texas.
Yep.
And I like to stay positive on what we're doing in this room and in this district for students, but I agree because I have gotten, text messages from people that have said, oh, look, so this is great news for us, right? And it's some, thing that's been put out by the governor's office talking about what they're doing for public education. And I have to say, well, it's easy to throw some numbers around and not really say what's behind them and make it look really good, and it may not be as great of news for public education as you think that it is. So it is important, I think, for us to be saying, hey, look behind some of that to know what's really going on, but at the same time to also say, hey, within this room, within this district, we're going to do everything we can to still serve students and help our teachers too.
And I appreciate, I know there's other districts that are cutting programs, shutting schools. Y'all are just tightening the belt. And I think I thank you again to your staff because I hope we do give a big raise or the biggest we can give. And we're still not, students are not going to see a difference. They're going to see actually a teacher that's maybe energized, getting paid a little bit more, and they're still going to have all the opportunities in our district that they have now to go out and achieve.
Yeah, super great discussion, presentation, information here, and I do hope people just take the time to understand that, because I've heard the same things, it's so much money, but when you look into the details, it really isn't. It's so far behind where we were, so I really appreciate all the comments
Well,
and all the work behind.
sorry. No, the governor has become a master at the concept of lies, damn lies, and statistics. So it's easy to give a big raise when you haven't given one in 6
What's the
years.
saying about statistics? It's the way to tell a half-truth and accurately.
Yeah.
That's what you can do with statistics.
You're gonna make me worry about my numbers.
But speaking of numbers, and I know until we have a exact budget, there's not an exact number, but to meet our requirement as far as the fund balance, usable non-designated fund balance, what do we have to keep?
Okay, so you keep 3 months. It says
Yeah.
suggested 3
So-
months.
So what's that number?
And so if you take, I'm gonna back up to this slide right here. Because I'm sorry, I did not calculate that before I got here. So we're gonna take the 151. We need about 38.5
And our fund balance is 38.5.
plus the 6 million
Plus
that
the
we're gonna add to it at the end of this school year.
Okay.
And that is undesignated fund balance, but you've kind of got to keep it about that level because when you look at some of this here that you've got committed fund balance 3.7, and as we kind of work our way out of this deficit, we probably need to put a little bit more in committed because what's going on right now when you think about insurance and what it's a percentage of a building, if it gets hit by hail, we've got to have fund balance set aside to be able to cover some of those costs. So that's why it's good to have a 3 months, but then set some aside for committed fund balance. So you're looking at 6 million.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. Well, next steps. Let's go quickly through. So there's a lot of moving parts with this budget. Like I said before, 6 months. July 1st is great for campuses and stuff. It gets a little hard when you have a crazy legislative session like we just went through. So on Tuesday, I had to send the information to the newspaper to post our hearing for our budget. So I kind of put this on your desk so that when you see this in the paper tomorrow, you understand what's going on. Saturday? Okay, so the paper will come out tomorrow and it'll do our public notice for our budget. This number is what it is right now because we will not adopt our tax rate until August, as long as my MCR that's approved by TEA in the month, beginning in August is less than the 0.6822, then I will not have to post this in the paper again. Okay, if it's more than 6822, I'll have to post again to adopt a tax rate. We're all working on maximum compressed rates right now based on values that we're receiving preliminary. Not only are we receiving our values preliminary, they moved our homestead from 100 to 140,000, which are not in our preliminary values. And so there's a lot of estimation going on behind the scene to try to come up with a T2 value, because remember, we don't have a lag effect anymore. We estimate our T2 values to get our MCRs, to get our, to make our tax rate. All of that plays into these numbers, but I wanted you to kind of see where it looks like. The latest run I did, even with estimating 140,000 homestead on the newest template from Omar, still has as its 0.6022 plus our 8-gallon penny 6822. So that's where we're sitting right now. However, when the dust settles and we get our actual certified values and we send those into TEA, they actually set our tax rate. We're just having to go early because this is the required notice to have a budget and adopt a budget. So you'll kind of see, and then when you look at 1.5% decrease in maintenance and operation, that is without House Bill 2, we would have had a decrease in our budget, and so that's what that reflects. So this is based on current law. And you can post based on current law, as long as we're consistent. So just wanted to kind of let you know if you had any questions from people when it hit the paper. Typically, you see a larger decrease in the compression, and you're not seeing that this year. So the values had to really grow closer to 11% to compress to the floor, and that's unusual because it hasn't been that way. It's usually if you grow a lot less, even 7%, you get compressed to the floor, but right now the compressions are running differently before, which throws another kink into it. So does anybody have any questions about the tax notice? Okay, so our next steps, other than the tax notice, is we'll go back and we're going to apply all those, we're going to apply an anticipated raise to our budgets to come up with actual numbers. I will re-audit all of our staffing, and then we will bring you the numbers on Tuesday night. We'll adopt the budget on June 17th. However, we will not adopt the tax rate until August. Does anybody have any questions? All right, that's all I have.
Great job, Heather. Appreciate
Thank
you. All right, that will bring us to executive session. Back in open session at 3:28, finishing up exec session.
Mr. Horak, after our executive session evaluation of the superintendent, I would move that we extend Dr. Harkrider's contract 2 additional years. Yeah,
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Ben, a second by Ms. Simmons. Any further discussion or questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment that while I think there's a lot of positive change that's been happening, especially over the last year, that I personally am in support of adding only 1 year to the contract as we normally do with the district, and so I'll be voting no on this.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
What do I say here? I forget. Oh my God, my motion passes 6-1. Sorry about that, y'all. That will bring us to adjourn. Thank you.